Good evening. I'm going to call the March 3rd Select Board meeting to order. We are using Zoom webinar for our meetings, which allows for the public to participate in the meeting as an attendee. Attendees must register to participate. The registration link is unique to each meeting. This can be found in the Nantucket Government TV YouTube live feed. People registering to be an attendee must use their names to identify themselves, otherwise they will not be allowed to participate in the discussion. Attendees will join in listening mode. They can click the raise the hand button if they wish to speak, and the chair will recognize those who have raised their hands in the order in which they were raised at the appropriate time. As a preliminary matter, I'm Dawn Holgate, Chair of the Nantucket Select Board. I will confirm that members are present and can hear me, and all of those anticipated on the agenda. I'll start with Select Board members. In the order that I see you, Melissa Murphy. Here. Jason Bridges.
Here.
Christy Ferrantella.
Here.
I don't see Matt Fee on yet, but we'll see when he logs in. Town staff members that are present, Ken Bogrand.
Here.
Roberto Santamaria.
Here.
Here.
And Turbot.
Present.
Rob McNeil.
Here.
Libby Gibson.
Present.
We have our town clerk, Nancy Holmes.
Present.
And then we also have John Giorgio from Town Council's office.
Present.
George Aronson is with us tonight.
Present.
Joe Topham.
Present.
Dan Driscoll.
Present.
Thank you. Matt Fee has joined us. Matt, can you hear me?
Yep, I'm here.
And Holly Backus has just joined us. Good evening, Holly.
Present.
This open meeting of the Select Board is being conducted remotely with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely as long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation. However, we do offer public participation as previously noted through the Zoom webinar functions. Please note that the meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware not to share your screen unless you intend to, as anything you can broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials for this meeting are on the town website under the Select Board page. I will go through the agenda and introduce the speakers. And as they conclude their remarks, people can raise hands for questions or comments. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly to generate accurate minutes. Please do not engage in conversations without going through the chair. And finally, vote will be taken via roll call this evening. With that, I don't believe that there are any changes to the agenda. And the only announcement is this meeting is being audio and video recorded, which was covered by the opening remarks. So we will jump right into the COVID-19 weekly update. And I will hand this over to Roberto Santamaria, our Public Health Director.
Okie dokie. So thank you. And it's been a few weeks. Sorry I missed the last meeting. I was actually very sick. It wasn't COVID though, so I'm glad to be back. So I'm gonna go ahead and pause this and share my screen. Okie dokie. So where we are with the COVID update is in pretty good shape. We've had 26,953 tests, 1,200 of which have been positive, which in total only comes out to about 4% of the it's a 4% positivity rate, which is really good overall throughout the very beginning since we've started testing for COVID. So that's in very good shape. Our total positives are still at 1,200. Our 7-day positives did jump a little bit, caused by a tiny spike yesterday that we're monitoring, and I'll get into that a little bit later. So where we stand is in the last 7 days, we've had 16 cases. If you remember, we were on a nice downward trend, and where we are now is, we had another little spike that we're seeing caused by travel through the winter break. So we've had a nice little flattening of the curve as we go. We are doing very well still, especially in comparison to where we were in November, December, and January. The sewer test that happened on Monday did show us on an upward trend again. We are looking at or matching or exceeding the September surge that we saw, which we're looking at about 5 cases per day this week. And that is directly attributable to people going out of the country, people traveling non-necessarily, for non-necessary things, vacations and stuff during this last week and a half. What we did see is we are seeing an upward trend on the population again, with the 1.33 million gallons per day. When you use the 55 gallons per day extrapolation through Title V, it brings it down to about 24,000 people on island as of that Monday, using the sewer system. I'm going to, as far as the metrics go, there's a lot of the other big metrics that I was using before, the positivity rate and stuff. It's kind of weaved into where we are now with this other stuff. So I removed those slides, but I have the information available if you have any questions. Where are we with the vaccine? We're still on phase 2, tier 2. This early education and K-12 workers portion, you may have heard the governor announce today that they are going to be, they are the next step in this phase, and they're opening up on Thursday of next week, a week from tomorrow. So you can sign up if you fall into this category of early education, K-12 workers or staff. You now qualify for the vaccine for starting next Thursday. So keep an eye out for go to the hospital's website or those links that you may have received through your patient gateway to look for appointments and to sign up for appointments there. So where are we in our progress? Of the 5,200 people that have signed up, using that as our litmus test, we have approximately 53% of them having received at least 1 dose, approximately 54 actually, if you round up. And 15.7% of them are now fully vaccinated as of Monday. So that's actually, we're in really good shape moving forward as far as the vaccinations go. We are at a cadence of approximately 900 doses per week, and we are moving forward with that allocation. The state did confirm with the hospital today that they're going to try to keep 900 doses flowing to Nantucket every week until they can secure a larger supply of the Johnson & Johnson or the Janssen vaccine as it becomes available. And then keep an eye out for communication from us in the hospital for tier 3, the next step of tier 2, of phase 2. They should have done, we're just going to call it phase 2C, A, B, C, and D, because it's easier that way. So we're in 2B right now, moving forward to 2C. Keep an eye out for that. And then phase 3 openings should be towards the end of next month. Nantucket is doing very well. We are still very ahead of the curve. So some questions that have been coming up that I would like to answer here. One of the big ones is the mask mandates. When can we expect mask mandates to start letting up? We in the state of Massachusetts like to pay attention to the science and CDC guidelines. So we are going to maintain our mask mandates there. Texas, Mississippi, and we're hearing that Georgia today also lifted their mask mandates, which is highly inadvisable. And we may see some spikes going into that because the variants are still not fully protected against and the vaccines haven't rolled out fast enough yet. So we are still looking at the mask mandates. But to answer the question of when can I take off my mask? Well, when we reach herd immunity. When is herd immunity? Well, there's in epidemiology, we have something called the herd immunity threshold, which is based on the basic reproductive rate, or the R number of COVID virus. The COVID virus, without mitigation standards, has an R number of 3.32. I do have the citation to that, so if anybody wants it, they can email me and I can get that to them. So using the herd immunity formula, which I have on display here, you'll see that 1 minus 1 over 3.2 gives you approximately a population of 69.998% that you need. So I round that up to approximately 70%, which means in the United States, we're not going to meet herd immunity until approximately 231 million people have received their full vaccination doses. So we're looking at sometime between September and December before you will start seeing mask mandates getting lifted across the country. I might start throwing in these major questions every once in a while in my presentations on Wednesdays. But with that, I've been trying to keep them nice, short, and sweet so that I don't waste anyone's time. And if you have any questions, I'm here for you.
Questions? Let me pull up the participants. Sorry, I didn't do that yet. Yes, Brooke Moore.
Hi, Dawn, thank you. Roberto, could you clarify for me, teachers are eligible to go on the hospital site next Thursday to register, or now?
Anyone can look at the appointments now. Teachers become eligible on Thursdays. So if you log on, let's say Saturday morning, if you log on, sorry, I'm looking at the screen instead of you. If you log on Saturday morning to sign up, any childcare worker, K through 12, teacher and staff members should sign up for appointments from Thursday on. Monday through Wednesday is still reserved for that 65 plus with the 2 comorbidities. So we are asking if you are a teacher or a staff member to not sign up for any of those 3 days. But yes, log in on Saturday or Friday afternoon and get an appointment for Thursday, Friday, or Saturday.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions this evening? Okay, great job, Roberto. Thank you.
Thank you.
COVID-19 task force, Jericho.
Yes, so the enforcement task force numbers, we'll start with those. There's a couple of other bits afterwards, but not too much from me today. By the numbers, we've had 339 field inspections. We have visited 322 job sites. 16 of those job sites have been shut down. 10 citations have resulted from those enforcement actions. We've had 15 tips from community members and 13 requests for clarification. At the moment, 94% of all interactions between task force members and the general populace have been full compliance, which leaves about 6% to be issues, the vast majority of which are mask violations, with a couple violations for logbook and kind of job site safety related issues. The trend on this continues to go in the good direction in that the compliance numbers are going up. We had a minor snafu, I think, as our numbers went down. People were getting a little less concerned with obeying job site safety issues, as well as there being a decent amount of ambiguity in the wording of a lot of reopening plans. So we're going to be doing another set of outreach to the various professional organizations to get everyone up on the same page. Looking ahead, the beginning of landscaping season is probably an issue that's going to be something that we kind of work on enforcement on. And then, of course, the increasing population of seasonal workers is also an area that we're going to be trying to be very careful to maintain sort of good epidemiological principles. In additional vaccine updates, there was the addition of the teachers. Just to clarify, you can, when the hospital scheduling tool goes live on their website this coming, I believe it's going to be Saturday morning this week, but there'll be more clarity on that shortly. When that goes live, anyone who is eligible in the new section added by Governor Baker can sign up on that day, but they must schedule their appointment for the 11th onward. So you can schedule now, but you have to pick a day that is after the revised eligibility rules for K through 12 workers and teachers. Additionally, we're getting our kind of regular cadence going out at the VFW. We'll have a regular amount of shipment out there, and then the rescheduling will be opening up pretty consistently on Saturday from now on. There's the Johnson & Johnson single dose vaccine was approved for use. It has been shipped to Massachusetts, but it is still in very short supply on the ground in Massachusetts, so we won't expect to get any of that anytime soon. And then just very quickly, so we had the town forms for signing up, and then you had to go to the hospital. At this point now, all scheduling takes place through the hospital website. So to get an appointment, you'll just have to go to the hospital website when the scheduling tool is active. And at that point, you can schedule your date and your time, and then you are all set, at least for your first dose. Your second dose will be scheduled there. Please do not go anywhere before you get your second dose. Don't go anywhere else. Don't try and get it anywhere else. Just be there in 3 or 4 weeks, depending upon which vaccine you received, and get it from the same place you got your first dose. It is very difficult on a whole number of levels to deal with different vaccination streams, different dates, different timing, different scheduling. So if you are scheduled for a vaccine, remember that 3 or 4 weeks later, you will have a second dose. Do not travel. Do not, make sure you're available for that second time. And then I believe, that's everything from me. Does anyone have any questions on enforcement or anything else?
Christy?
Thank you. I have a question about the vaccines. With having the Johnson & Johnson come out, will people be able to pick which vaccine they get, or will the hospital be deciding?
No, there is no provision whatsoever for choosing your vaccine. The supplies are too tight. The storage issues are too complicated. And the fact that doses have to be portioned out based on the vials means that no, you cannot. You can obviously refuse to have a vaccination if you're given one particular choice. Prefer you don't do that, but there is no real mechanism in place to allow people to choose doses.
Thank you.
Matt?
That's a good question, Christy, because I hate needles, and I would like to do the Johnson & Johnson and just get stuck once. I'm going to be crying like a baby. But so anyway, that's a good question.
Yeah, no, it definitely is, and there are definite reasons why people would have strong opinions one or the other on the vaccine. We just simply cannot do that, unfortunately. So this, I think that there are going to be places come phase 3 when it's generally available, you'll be able to do a little bit more in the way of choosing. But as far as the kind of this emergency rapid vaccination process, there's just no way we can do that effectively. Any other questions? No? All right. Thank you very much, guys. Have a nice day.
I thought I saw.
Thank you. Sorry, my internet went out.
Oh, no problem.
Oh, Christy?
Sorry, just one more question. With it opening up to people who work in the school, do you know if the school is working to make sure that all the staff and everything's being translated into multiple languages to get everybody signed up?
Yes, we're definitely, we've got most of the various sign up material available in a couple of different island popular languages. And then we're working into kind of an outreach and kind of scheduling process that's going to make sure that we get everybody in the schools vaccinated.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Do we have an economic task force update?
Yes, I'll be giving the update this week. Thank you. So the Economic Task Force took a mini break like the Select Board last week, but we're still moving forward with a lot of moving pieces. 2 weeks ago, the Select Board approved a grant to the Chamber of Commerce, and the grant application for small businesses has now opened to apply for small grants. There's a couple of different criteria. There's ones through Remain, and then there's ones through the town. So if you are a small business looking for assistance, please check out the town, the Chamber's website. I'm sure Amy will be discussing this tonight, but the state of Massachusetts is moving into phase 3, step 2 on March 22nd. So we're fielding a lot of questions from businesses on the task force email. And trying to get information out to businesses as quickly as possible, while also deciphering a lot of the stuff that's coming down from the state. The good news is that the town is lined up with the state, so kind of all questions can go through the state website as well, mass.gov/reopening. The task force is going to be working with Paula and the NRTA on a commuter shuttle for this summer, and we've recruited Mark Donato to kind of be that liaison between the task force and Paula. And so that's going to be continued discussions between town admin, Paula, and this task force to see what are the needs of businesses this summer and how can we help shuttle workers to and from town and to alleviate some of that in-town parking. On parking, I know, Matt, you asked last time for the task force to give a recommendation on what enforcement should start and kind of what we want the parking regulations to look like this summer. We just started those conversations today, so we're hoping to have a recommendation for next week. In the meantime, we kind of had consensus that we want the 2-hour parking to start on June 1st. This past year, it started on July 1st, but with it being expected to be busier summer, based on the bookings and the boat reservations, it was decided that we would like to see that start June 1st. But we will be giving an update next week. And lastly, we've been trying to do a lot of outreach to businesses, and right now potentially we'll be holding a Zoom next Wednesday at 1 p.m. for businesses. That's going to be confirmed the next couple of days. So check your email from the chamber or the town or Amy, and we'll be inviting everybody to participate, and there'll be a space to ask questions and learn about what the task force has been doing and suggestions for how to have a safe and successful summer. And if you have any questions at all, you can always email the ACK task force at nantucketchamber.org. So, a lot of updates, but we're moving through and getting ready for summer.
Libby?
I just want to mention, I wasn't aware of recommendations coming forward about parking regulations, but we should, with regard to that, I think what happened last year was very unusual, and that the parking regulations, if I'm recalling them correctly, already say something starts on June 1st, and it was consciously moved out a bit. So if we need to understand what is deviating from existing regulations, and they may or may not require a public hearing depending on what we're talking about. So the sooner we understand what those things are, the better. So it may not be very much, but just.
Right. We just discussed how it was kind of a one-off last year, and it was decided that we didn't want to extend that again for this year. So I think it would be keeping it the same as previous years, but we'll come back next week with a more definitive answer.
Thank you. Matt?
Yeah, and I'm glad to hear we're talking about it, because we've got to talk about it and get ahead of it. And I think it's important. The task force is reaching out to businesses. I think it's important that businesses realize that that they have a large impact on getting their employees to use the bus, to come in on bikes or do whatever. And I think they also need to realize that there'll be enforcement this year. And, and I think when we start and end is important, and what hours is enforced is important. If when we, people figure out what hours enforcement is and what streets, and they start packing India and other streets, knowing they won't get a ticket after 1 o'clock, those things, we're going to be, I think, very busy this summer. And if the businesses are going to succeed, there needs to be some turnover. It can't be locked up with the same cars all day. I've grown up with this issue. On the wharf, it was an issue with my dad. At Henry's, we used to not be enforcement in front of those buildings. And, that finally happened. I also had a business on Oak Street that I sold largely because when we didn't enforce in the winter, the days they enforced, I would do $500 more, and it was possible to stay open versus the days we didn't. And so I think the businesses have to realize that it may be a little bit inconvenient for themselves or their employees, but if they want to have successful business, this is something that has to happen, within the structure we have right now. And it may have to go till 6, 7, 8 at night. Maybe it's 2 hours after a certain time, a 2-hour limit or something at night, but we have to think it through. Otherwise, we're going to have a real issue, I believe, this summer. Everything I'm hearing is we're going to be extremely busy. People are assuming that we're going to be safer than we were last year, and everything's going to be great. And it's going to be crazy is what everything I'm hearing. So.
Anything else for this evening on the economic task force? Okay. I think that concludes. Oh, Melissa.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I put my hand up, I put my hand down. Amy, I'm going to save you one more email if you don't mind, through Don. I think you may have said this, Christy, but if you could just reiterate, I'm receiving a lot of inquiries about the details on event capacity, particularly for people who are, okay. It's coming up. Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure we were going to touch base on that tonight because it's going to be really helpful to get that information out to the public. Thank you.
Amy, do you want to make some comments?
Yeah, I wanted to, we wanted to just, what Melissa just discussed, the 2 updates that the governor had talked about last week and how it relates to Nantucket. As Christy had mentioned, we are aligned with the state. So I want to make sure everyone knows that we don't have any specific things that are different at the moment. As long as the health metrics stay in the positive direction, we'll continue to do so. When we discuss, as Melissa said, there's a lot of questions. When we discuss that we're looking into this and making sure we explain it, how it impacts Nantucket, that's just because some of it's confusing and not everyone's understanding how it applies. So we're not making it stricter or doing anything special. We're just trying to explain it, taking in all your questions and going to provide FAQs and comprehensive list of that hopefully on the website as well. So it explains what was said. If I can quickly just review, starting this week, phase 3, step 2, it affected just a couple of things. Restaurants no longer have a percentage capacity limit. We're basically back to what we were before the spike, which is distancing between tables, 6 feet distancing, 6 people maximum at a table. The 90-minute time limit remains. No food court self-serve buffets still in effect. So basically seated meals, 6 people and 6 feet distancing. They are now saying that live music is allowed at restaurants, so long as it is just mostly for folks that are seated, following performance safety guidelines. Retail, fitting rooms are allowed to be open across all retail, and theaters and some performance venues are allowed to reopen at 50% capacity. Other businesses like salons and libraries and museums, lodging common spaces, things of that sort were increased to 50% capacity. They were at 40% prior. So that's basically the update this week. The questions are coming on the March 22nd update. of the governor, and what the confusion, I think, is over the gathering limits. Basically, what they're saying is starting March 22nd, you can have 100 people indoors, 150 people outdoors at licensed and permitted event venues and public settings. So public property, publicly accessed property, and licensed event venues. There is still a restriction on private residences, 10 people indoors, 25 outdoors. The intention being that permitted and licensed venues are going to be following health metrics and health protocols a lot more closely than, say, throwing up a tent in a private home and having 100 people in the backyard. So I think that's the intent behind it. There's confusion, obviously, with some of these events and folks having weddings. So basically, we're going to have to kind of deal with some of these different issues. But again, this is just March 22nd. If you're having an event in June, that may change. We don't know that. That's the other big question. What's it going to be like in June? We don't know. Hopefully it'll evolve and these will come together. So the other thing that will change is dance floors are allowed. However, just at weddings and permitted events, not at nightclubs, not at any sort of restaurant or thing of that sort. Large venues are going to be reopening. That doesn't really apply to us as much, but I want to say that large venues means defined event venues, not open public spaces that have events for 5,000 people. Okay. And again, things that aren't yet allowed, road races, street festivals, parade fairs, and things of that sort are still beyond that and reopening. So I just wanted to make that point in saying that, you know, we're going to try to best explain that for your different situations. If I've not answered you yet, it's coming. We're kind of going through that. Are there any questions from the board on that description? No. We will communicate as we go, and as you know, we make sure this will happen on March the 22nd, and explain any confusion there is on any of these. Also, again, we will post this information as well on the website, town website.
Thank you, Amy. Melissa?
Yeah, thank you, Dawn, and thank you, Amy. That's great. Just a suggestion, using the outreach tool through the task force has been really effective to share that information. So making sure we get it out through those channels. Certainly at the chamber, we're happy to send it out. And then I just have a question, Dawn, through you to Roberto, if that's okay. When we say that our guidelines are in line with the state now, is that across all industries? So there's no further restrictions on construction, landscaping? I know that a lot of emergency orders may still be in place. Does the Board of Health need to vote to rescind those? Or I'm a little bit confused about where we are with some of those.
As far as the Board of Health needing to rescind some of the calls, some of the parts of it, we've rescinded paragraphs of it that are no longer relevant. Some of them are still relevant. So for example, we extended the outdoor dining one. That one, we need to keep that one in place. I think the shellfish extension one is still in effect as well. And we also have a local mask order in place. We keep those two in place just because it gives us that local authority to be able to enforce it under Chapter 31A. And MGL 111, Section 122. We have to create, yeah, John, correct me if I'm wrong on any of that. We have to have the regulations in place in order to be able to enforce those. So we're keeping those in place. But we don't have anything else.
So no other industries because I know early in the pandemic, we were stricter than the state in some industry specifics. And we've been getting a lot of questions like, you know, I think sometimes the release of them is a little unclear for all of us to keep up with. So just to make sure that all industries can go to mass.gov reopening and find the information they need to be in compliance.
Yeah, it should all be on the state. I don't know of any industry specific orders that are stricter than the state.
Okay, Thank you.
Matt? Matt, you're muted.
You can go. I'll go after Amy. Shoot her hand up.
Amy, go ahead. Sorry.
No worries. And to follow Roberto on that is a good point. Most people are focused on gathering limits and other things too as well. I also wanted to point out through the state, there is sector-specific guidance for whatever you're doing, whether it's a sporting event, whether it's a theater performance, there are performance venue sector-specific guidance. So you have the gathering limit, and then if you're doing food and beverage service, you're going to follow similar to a restaurant, those guidance. And if you're performing music, that guidance. So you have your gathering limits, and then you have your sector-specific guidance that will guide you through specific things for your staff and for customers and that sort of thing as well.
Actually, yes, I do want. Sorry, Matt. I do want to jump in on that. That singing portion and the events thing. That's a big one. Sector-specific guidance is really big, because you can do certain parts of performance in an event venue, but not in a restaurant. So that's kind of the things we need to pay attention to.
Yeah, and my comment was going to be similar, that there's sector specific in that there was misunderstandings last year because some people didn't realize that how strict the state was for their, or what the recommendations were for their industry, and we're doing something different. And so I think that as we, sort of when we talk about it or we message that maybe we're loosening or we're the state, people still have to know they have to follow the state. I think with going out and doing a lot of the outreach that we've done with a lot of the businesses this winter will be very helpful. But I think people have to realize they probably are going to still be checking their employees in and doing a lot of the things that we're required to do. And I just think that it's going to be tricky as we sort of loosen, that people just don't completely think that there's nothing to worry about anymore. Yeah. There's still plenty to worry about, as Roberto pointed out earlier, that, we're not going to hit herd immunity till, after the summer. So I think, with the new variants and with some of the things that are happening, people have to, we're not through this yet, and we don't want to pretend we're through it, or we could have some issues.
Yeah, and I'd love to follow up with Matt there real quick, because he is definitely correct. On the enforcement front, we are not anticipating any of the current restrictions for the trades to be relaxed anytime soon. We're not expecting, a lot of the retail and all the other various kind of contact tracing assessment, enhancing practices that we've got and the various protocols. We should not expect those to relax at any point until after the summer is over.
Yeah, we're on the equivalent of Heartbreak Hill here. The end is there, you're close, but we're still got a long way to go.
And very much considering that a lot of the various guidances that were developed early on in this are for the main version of COVID, and we have at least 2 more contagious variants of COVID, as well as a potentially breakthrough, like a potential immunity violating one with the E484K variants. There is, it is not time to relax yet. It's in the Spanish flu, they thought they had got it done, and they literally threw a party, and more people died after that party than before the party. So it's not over yet. Please don't think it is.
Matt?
My other question is about quarantining and things. Last summer, until now, any employee coming from out of state, we required a test. We had them quarantined. We had a separate room set up for that. We're still planning on doing that. That worked for us. Is that something that will still be recommended? How are businesses expected to handle that still?
Sorry. My bad. Sorry.
I was just going to say, yes, the travel orders are still in effect. So you still have to do that sort of things. But however, we have the testing that you can do as well. So you quarantine while you're waiting for your test with the negative testing, unless you have that negative test within the 72 hours before you get back to the state. But the quarantine and everything like that is still in effect, and I think it's still a good idea anyway. So I think if you have that extra room that you can set aside, I think it's a great idea.
Because I think there might have been some confusion about this over this current vacation as well. You must isolate until you get your test if you have not gotten the test within 72 hours of your arrival to the island. That I don't see as going away anytime soon. That was in place before the surge, and will probably be one of the last things that gets removed. Probably.
Melissa?
Thank you, Don. Just around that, it's somewhat confusing to me because if you travel on a Saturday back to Nantucket and maybe you stop at a CVS and get tested on Saturday afternoon or asymptomatic tested on Sunday, from what I understand, that may not actually pick up any virus you've contracted in the previous 5 days, 3 to 5 days, or certainly not that day. So, and I recognize this is a state thing, but I think I've been dealing with a lot of families who have a lot of confusion around that, getting tested to be in compliance with the travel order, but then maybe 4 or 5 days after that becoming positive. Is there any local recommendation on that?
I mean, so if I was going to make your travel plans for you around this, if you cross a state line, you should take a test before you leave the place you're starting for. And then you should take a test before you leave to come back. And then you should isolate for 3 days. It's very onerous to do safe travel, but it would involve 2 periods of guaranteed isolation while you wait for to develop virus loads enough to be noticeable from a PCR. I mean, the solution here is if you do not have to travel, do not travel. That is the only safe answer here, basically. But the travel order was written in a way to be something that is possible for people to do on a regular basis, but it is not the safest way to do it, but it is the legally binding one. Ideally you should come home, you should go straight to your house, you should wait 24 hours, and then you should go directly to an asymptomatic testing line to get your test done. That is the best way to do it. The legal one is within 72 hours of your arrival, or isolating for 14 days. Either one of those will get you around to having to isolate until the testing. But there really is no convenient and safe option here.
And there shouldn't be any unnecessary travel, period.
Yeah.
Yeah, how we've done it as a business, the kids get here, they're out of state, we isolate them for 4 or 5 days, and then they're tested. And as soon as they get their test back, they're able to work. We don't want to put them in the pool with our other employees. We don't want to, because then we have an entire, if something happens, then we've got the entire operation shut down. And so, and we bring them food and, and support them while they're there. But that's what we have done to date. And I think it's, it is onerous. It's very difficult.
It's very difficult, but it is definitely, that's very effective. That is the best way to do it.
Can you clarify the guidance on the people who've had COVID and have done their isolation and, say are traveling back to Nantucket from somewhere else? They contracted COVID elsewhere, did 14 days, but it's still within like the 3 months. I mean, they could very well still test positive.
There are some issues around how long PCR tests will still pop. The guidance there is as long as there's no new travel, the 10-day quarantine is sufficient. If they leave the state again, then it restarts the clock on there, and because of the fact that they may still be being positive from a previous infection, I would recommend that they isolate for the entire duration of the 10 days. If they've been infected once and then they go on another trip, then I would say you would do the whole isolation, because the potential for you would still possibly be popping a PCR test if in that context. So there isn't a 100% conclusive, legally actionable science on this particular point, but you always err on the side that you actually have it. And we know pretty effectively that the 10-day isolation period reduces your ability to infect other people, if nothing else. So that would be, if you have had COVID in the past and you're worried about that as being a factor of a positive or a negative test, then you should isolate for the full 10 days. You should just not travel, really, is the point that we should be making. But if you do have to travel for some reason, that you have to factor that into account.
Are there other questions? Okay. Can we move on to the next agenda item? Public comment for items not related to COVID-19 or anything else that is on the agenda this evening. This is a chance for people to bring anything to our attention, potentially for a future meeting. Megan Perry has her hand up.
Thanks, Dawn. I was just going to announce that NCTV 18 will be covering the Surfside Crossing versus Town of Nantucket hearing at the Housing Appeals Committee that starts tomorrow at 10 a.m. They'll be airing it live on Channel 18 and also on YouTube.
Thanks for letting us know that. Are there any other public comments this evening? Seeing none, there's no new business. Approval of minutes, warrants, and pending contracts. I think Christy had one edit that she's already sent to Erica. So with that,
Move approval of all.
Okay, and the payroll and treasury warrants, 1, 2, and 3. Is there a second? All those in favor by roll call. Melissa Murphy.
Aye.
Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Approval of pending contracts. Are there any questions or comments?
Motion to
Move
approve.
approval. Second.
All those in favor by roll call. Melissa Murphy.
Aye.
Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. We have a couple of items on the consent agenda. 2 gift acceptances.
Motion to approve and send a letter of thanks.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call. Melissa Murphy.
Aye.
Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Notification is required by amendment to MGL Chapter 136. This is a change in Sunday hours for Nantucket Meat and Fish from noon to 10 a.m. They're just required to notify us. Is there a motion?
I'm going to recuse. They're customers, good customers.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call. Melissa Murphy.
Aye.
Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Next up, we have citizen departmental request. NCTV 18, request for approval to expand number of directors from 9 to a maximum of 13. Dan?
Again, I think the letter explains it, but as representing NCTV, thank you all. Our bylaws require that the select board approve the change in the number of our board of directors. We're currently at 9. We would like approval to have it as a minimum of 9 and a maximum of 13. So that's the request before you.
Are there any questions or comments? Matt,
Move approval.
is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
John Holgate, aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Request for hardship waiver of sewer connection fee and sewer capacity for a home destroyed by an explosion at 39 Surfside Road. Does anybody have any questions on this?
This,
Yeah.
yeah, this is entirely appropriate. We've done this before in these situations. I'd like to move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. That passes unanimously.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Joe. Alliance to Protect Nantucket Sound, request to reaffirm Nantucket as a signatory for a letter to Senator Sear and Representative Fernandez to support federal protection for Nantucket Sound. Holly?
Good evening, Select Board. Thank you for having me. I am before you as staff with other staff members who would request your support for the Alliance to Protect Nantucket Sound to request a letter sent to our representatives. As you all know, Nantucket Sound is a very sacred place and a cultural historical landmark, and it is actually a traditional cultural property registered through the National Register of Historic Places. And this bill that is being requested would actually make Nantucket Sound become a National Historic Landmark, just like Nantucket has that as well. So that's what this letter is, for your continued support, which you all have affirmed before. I believe the director for Alliance to Protect Nantucket Sound is available if you have any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Matt?
I'll move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Finance Department request for approval of the sale of bond anticipation notes in the amount of $10,250,000 for affordable housing purposes. Good evening, Brian.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Before you, you have a request to approve the sale, as noted, of $10,250,000 in bond anticipation notes. There were two series that were sold in this recent sale. There's a taxable Series A, which was awarded to Oppenheimer and Company, in the amount of $2,325,000 with a net interest cost of 0.2985%. And then there was a Series B tax exempt portion of the sale in the amount of $7,925,000. That award was made to TD Securities with a net interest cost of 0.1866. The majority of this money is going to be used for the 31 Fairgrounds project that was recently announced. And the remainder is going to be used for two projects that the Affordable Housing Trust is currently working on, and timing predicated us on getting the borrowing done in advance of those projects starting, so that the funds would be available at that time. There is interest costs of $26,000, which is the only real financial impact to this until we permanently borrow them. There was 5 bidders for the taxable series and 6 bidders for the tax exempt series. So Eric, I believe that you have the vote that we could put up for the board to hopefully favorably act on. Thank you.
And just to put it out there, the motion, if you do move to approve, should be move to approve the vote that is found in your packet dated March 3rd, 2021.
Is someone willing to make that motion?
Move to approve the vote found in our package, March 3rd, 2021.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. That carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Town clerk request for support to discontinue current voting tabulators, approve use of newly purchased voting tabulators pursuant to MGL Chapter 54, Section 34. We have to approve the change. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. Yes, we have to notify the Secretary of State's office of a select board approval of the new tabulators and the discontinuance of the old tabulators. The purchase of these tabulators was approved last fiscal year, and they were purchased towards the end of the last fiscal year. And we'd like to be able to receive and use them for the first time in the annual town election. So that notification has to be made more than 60 days, or no less than 60 days, I should say, prior to that June election. So we just need a vote for the MGL 54, Section 34, and then I've given Erica a sample letter that you could all sign, and I will just be required to send that up to the Secretary of the Commonwealth's office.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call: Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Christy Carantella,
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. That carries unanimously. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Don, quick comment before we move off this. I had someone call me worried that we were going to be all electronic and, that we were going to, not have backup and blah, blah, blah. And he actually called Nancy and was, sort of learned we're doing it basically the same way as we have before. We just have new machines. So for anyone else out there worried that this is a, sort of a way for me to be reelected again, that I've got some sway over the machines, that's not the truth. So.
That's right. Massachusetts still requires paper ballots. So it's just an updated and more secure technology, and the old machines haven't been manufactured even in about 15 years. So it's time to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have real estate items. We have request for approval and execution of documents with GG Development LLC. This was tabled from February 17th because some documents weren't ready. And Ken will be going over A, B, and C with us. Ken Beaugrand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When the planning board provided for the creation of this 12-lot subdivision next to St. Mary's Cemetery, they required the developer to establish a homeowners association for the maintenance of the roadways, sidewalks, and other roadway improvements in the subdivision, and to record a declaration of protective covenants. The planning board also required that the homeowners association grant to the town sewer, bicycle path, sidewalk, and pedestrian easements in the roadway and the homeowners association property, and also to record a grant of the right to enforce those restrictions to the subdivision to the town. So what you have before you is two actions that are encompassed by one document. First, the town needs to accept the gift from the developer. And in addition to the gift, we need to accept the non-exclusive easement to the town for the pedestrian, bike, and vehicular use, and the right to enforce the restrictions as set forth in the Declaration of Protective Covenants. The property has been reviewed by the town employees to make sure that everything meets the standards and everything is appropriate. Town council has reviewed all the documentation, and now in your packet is the corrected documentation, which wasn't available 2 weeks ago. And so it's a staff recommendation to accept the gift and to prepare to approve the acceptance of the easements to the town. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions, comments, motions? Matt? Matt, you're muted still.
All right, sorry. Yeah, Ken, it was in your what you gave us. It said, "Is my understanding roadway improvements have been inspected by the town? That's so
Yeah.
we have inspected, correct?
We have, absolutely. I made a personal call to make sure that that statement was correct after I wrote the AIS.
Okay. Follow up, the planning board in their conditions had the width of the roads, it had storm basins. And one of my questions whenever we do this is, do we specify sort of the thickness of the asphalt and, sort of in the underlayment? Are we at that level yet? Because if we aren't, we should be, because otherwise, eventually we take the road and that becomes our job. So do you know if we had, specified how the engineering for the roads had to be completed?
I do not know that answer. Sorry, Matt.
Right. And, so I think my guess is we didn't, because it's not in the planning board, but my suggestion is we should, and maybe we did, hopefully we did, but we should. Otherwise, what we do is we get the right width and the right length and et cetera, but then we get a road that lasts 5 years or 10 years, not, 30 like it should. So.
They are putting money into their HOA for road maintenance.
Yeah, that's their ongoing responsibility, is to in fact maintain all of the things that's there. And all we have is the right to enforce it and make sure that they do that. We don't have to do that. We have the right to enforce them to do that. And if we would have to do something, we'd be able to add it to their tax base of the abutters.
Right. Sorry, if I can.
Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, and I understand that, and I agree with that. But the reality is, when it comes time to actually do betterments or add it, staff and boards are very hesitant at times. And so I just think it's really important up front. And I'm going to support this. I'm not against this.
Yeah.
I'm pointing out that, the more specific we can be about, what the quality needs to be, and the more, we can improve that process, the less likely we are to have, something bite us later. So.
No, understood.
Yeah. So, I'm in favor. I'll vote to, I vote.
You want to make a motion while you're there?
I'll make a motion to do it.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call: Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Matt Fay,
Aye.
Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Carries unanimously. Erica?
I just wanted to make sure that was for A, B, and C, right? It was the entire.
Yes.
Yeah, all three. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Next up, we have the town manager's report. I'll turn it over to you, Libby.
Thank you. So this item is continued from your meeting of February 10th, and there was a lot of discussion at that time about the upcoming RFP for the Jetties concession, which we need to get out pretty soon so that we can have the new lease awarded before summer, so that we know who's going to be running it next year. It's a timing situation. And as we know, there were a lot of concerns about various issues with who does what at the concession with regard to maintenance, repairs, equipment, things of that nature. So there's an internal team that's been looking at this and reviewing a lot of different things with town council. And I'm going to turn it over to town council and the director of finance to go through what the recommendations are, as well as some options for the board to consider with regard to the lease. Who's gonna kick it off?
John is actually going to take the board through the memo that we had discussed in consultation with him.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you all. So the group did some further due diligence after the last meeting. And we discussed what the issues are and some various options, all of which are set forth in the memo that's in your packet. So the awning that currently exists, we've confirmed that it is owned by the current tenant who purchased it from the prior tenant. And in 2018, the town expended $35,000 to repair the awning, and that was actually funds that came from the town's insurance company. And I think we mentioned last week or 2 weeks ago that the awning is in further need of repair for this upcoming season. So the town issued an invitation for bid, and we did receive a bid to repair it in the amount of $30,000. We are still in discussions with the contractor, however, because he is seeking indemnification from the town because the concern is the awning is in such bad shape. Not to speak for the contractor, but I think what was communicated to us was that it's in such bad shape that if he touches it, there could be further problems. So that's still under discussion. As Libby indicated, the current lease terminates on December 31st of 2021 this year, and the RFP would be for a new 5-year lease. So it's important to understand that the current lease, let me back up a minute. The finance director and I were concerned that if the town were to appropriate any money to fix a attachment to that building that we don't own, it could raise questions about whether that's a valid public purpose. But there is a provision in the existing lease that says that any improvements or replacements of equipment made to the premises at the expense of the town will become the property of the town of Nantucket. And so when we looked at that, we concluded that the town could spend the money to repair it, but only if we acquired the awning. And we would do that through some kind of a bill of sale or other document. And then it's town property, the town could improve it. There's nothing in the existing lease that affirmatively obligates the tenant to maintain that awning. However, so we don't know exactly what the current tenant might do if the town decides not to repair the awning. They could certainly take it down. They could replace it with, for example, the large scale umbrellas that you see in many places as a temporary fix for this coming season. We don't know what the tenant will do, however, if the town decides not to do anything to that awning, at least in the short term. I will also point out that under the existing lease, upon termination of the lease, the town has the right to take the possession of the premises and to remove the concessionaire's effects. So that would include the awning. If for some reason the concessionaire who's currently leasing that decides not to submit a bid or he's not awarded the bid, he could remove that awning or he could leave it, and it would be up to the town to decide what to do with the awning. So the town administration has been looking at some preliminary estimates. Now, I want to emphasize these are not, engineers' estimates. They're not anything official, but the estimate is that to replace the current awning, you'd have to do more than just simply purchase an awning. You'd have to put footers in order to protect the awning, and the estimate is that's going to be about a $500,000 cost. And of course, if you do something more than simply replace the awning, I know we talked a couple of weeks ago about potentially putting in a wooden structure with a roof. That obviously would be much more expensive than the $500,000. So we're at a point now where the town administration needs policy direction from the select board as to how you wish to proceed. And we've identified two options for you to consider tonight. The first option is that the town does not make any repairs to the awning, does not take ownership of the awning, and leaves it up to the current tenant to decide what to do with respect to this upcoming summer season. Certainly the tenant could, but is not required to repair that awning. And so it would be something left up to the tenant to decide. And then going forward in the new RFP under this option, we could write the RFP in a way that says the tenant is responsible for maintaining or replacing the awning at its sole cost and expense. Or we could specify that the new tenant is required to provide adequate covering for a minimum number of seats outside of the restaurant building itself. And I know that I raised the issue of compliance with the public bidding laws, but on further investigation, because we don't own the awning, I think the town could include some provision in the new lease that the decision whether to replace that awning or not would be the tenant's decision, and that any new improvements would be owned by the tenant, and they would have the right to remove that awning or any other equipment at the end of the 5-year lease. So we could write the lease that way, and it would be basically where we are today, that the new tenant would have the discretion how to deal with the awning. The second option would be that the town basically take over the responsibility for maintaining and or replacing that awning. And that would include, if we can negotiate something with the bidder, would include making that $30,000 worth of repairs for this upcoming season. And then in the new RFP, we would specify that the town would take the responsibility for keeping that awning in good repair. Now, in order to fund this, because as we know, there's a certain amount of money that we're going to get from this lease, and without putting the responsibility on the tenant, that's a cost that would be avoided, and hopefully that would increase the bids for the new 5-year lease. And what we came up with is to consider going to town meeting, not this year, but in 2022, and asking the town to authorize a new revolving fund into which all of the rental proceeds that the town receives would go into that revolving fund. The finance director has suggested that we do that over basically a 3-year period and slowly ramp up the money. I believe it was 25 in the first year, 50% in the second year, and 100% in the third year. And that way, Brian could adjust the operating budget to take into account that that money is now going to be in a segregated account. And that money, of course, as it accumulates in that fund, would be available for the town to expend on the maintenance and improvements to the building. It wouldn't just be the awning, it would be for any improvements that are needed, that are not the responsibility of the tenant under the lease. We also talked about the potential of including in the revolving fund more than just this concession at Jetties Beach. I believe there are 2 other concessions. And so depending upon what you decided to do, you could expand the definition of the facilities in the revolving fund, and then all the money, all the rental income would go into that revolving fund. It means that it would accumulate faster, and you could use it on any one of the 3 concession stands as the need arises. So after much debate and discussion, the group is recommending to the board that you consider option 2. And there are basically 3 reasons for that. First, the concession is a town asset, and we believe that the town has a compelling interest in ensuring that the facility and all of its components are properly maintained. It's an asset of the town. Under this theory, the town should maintain it. And if you do take responsibility for repairs and improvements, the town can control how and when those improvements are made. It's not on someone else's timeline. It's not on someone else's financial needs. The town would decide when and what repairs to be made. And then thirdly, by establishing the revolving fund, the town would have money set aside available to be expended right out of that revolving fund without town meeting approval to meet the needs of the town with respect to making those repairs. So that's basically our recommendation. We also would recommend that the board convene a work group in conjunction with the Parks and Rec Commission to review the Jetties Beach area campus and provide recommendations for improvements, taking into consideration public need, best practices, and long-term resiliency. So that's basically our recommendation. And we fully understand that the select board is the policy-making board, and it's really your decision to decide how you want to proceed going forward. And we can make either one work. So you just have to make that decision.
Thank you, John. If I can just jump in, I'd like to say that I agree with the recommendation for option 2. I believe we should take over the maintenance of this, and in the interest of keeping things family friendly and lower cost in the concession as a benefit to the town. I also really like the revolving fund and the convening of a work group. I'd like to suggest that work group include probably Holly Backus as our preservation planner, working in conjunction with the Historical Commission, because I think that there are some opportunities for tax credits or a grant. And I did speak to the chair of the Historical Commission today. She's got her hand up. I'll go to her in a moment. But I just wanted to hear some initial thoughts from the board on this. I know you all had some more extensive discussion after I had to leave the meeting last time when this came up. Matt?
Yeah, I've been sort of concerned about this for a few years. I believe the lease, is very clear. We didn't owe it. We don't own it. We didn't owe it, and we shouldn't have paid to fix it before or now. The tenants understood the lease, and I don't think we should. I feel very strongly that we should not take that responsibility on. It's in really rough shape, and it's not ours. And going forward, I think the things that are positive, that I think the revolving fund is very positive. I think that putting a group together to look at this and including, historic commission, et cetera, is very positive. I've been helping to put that into place. And so, and I think what we have down there is a unbelievable asset that, that we need to take care of. There's a way to do it that, that can improve that building at hardly any cost to the town. And, between Historic Commission, CPA, and tax credits, we can get a lot done down there. We need to do a plan first, which I'm sure they'll discuss. So I think, I'd like to break this up into the awning discussion, who owns it and takes care of it. I think we should, my suggestion, and I'll make a motion after everyone else speaks, my suggestion is to not own it, to continue to keep the lease the way it was for the next 5 years, put that group together, and then figure out how we want to fix that building and potentially expand that building. So they've got another section that looks similar to what's out there now. And it's where the Cahoons had their camp back in the day. So I think that there's a way to improve that, historically accurate, get the building looking good, get people back inside it in this 5-year period, but then the next 5-year period, there's a way to to do that. But I think right now, the awning is not ours. We should have not paid for it. We should not continue to pay for it. So I would like to make that motion when everyone else has had their say, and then work on the RFP terms.
Christy?
Thank you. Just a couple of thoughts that I had. I like the idea of the revolving fund and including all of the rentals. With putting a work group together, I would think that that work group could also work on Children's Beach and Surfside, given a lot of the comments that we received this past year about some improvements to Children's Beach. And in terms of the awning, I think Matt makes a really good point that it's a really valuable asset and that there's opportunities for grants. And I'm just wondering, if we don't take over ownership from the town, would those grant opportunities still be available to a private entity, whoever is running the concession? So I think that's more to John to answer.
I think he was referring to rehab of the building, Matt.
That the rehab of the building. Yeah, exactly, Christy. The awning itself would, that may be covered, at that point when we get a plan done and approved, et cetera. It's a long process, but no, that wouldn't help with this. And that's not a reason to take this over. It's in rough shape, it's in rough shape, and it's just something we shouldn't take responsibility of. If the bidders if we take it over, then, we'll get probably the same. If they bid a little less, I'd take less money there right now for the next 5 years, then, and let them, that they'll reflect that in their bids. So I think this is the time. It was in the previous one. It was in our RFP that was drafted last week, said we didn't own it. The lease said we didn't own it. So.
I disagree. I mean, I agree with what the lease says. I think that it would be better policy for us to have control over the exterior maintenance of this building and to have it be reflected in sort of the overall contract and trying to keep this a real town asset. Melissa?
Thank you, Dawn. I agree with you. I think the awning has become a part of the building. It's how the applicants for any of the RFPs have been able to judge what their ability to serve is. It makes it a much longer season for them. And I think it provides a great benefit to the public, which is really I think the main point of any improvement and or asset that we need to consider. So from a public use and enjoyment perspective, I think it's become a part of the building, and it would be what is it, penny wise, pound foolish. I'm not good at those kinds of things, but I think it's a good idea for us to assume it, take responsibility. I do want to thank Maria Zoda for reaching out. I know she reached out to Matt. She also reached out to me. She sent some great information for this work group to work on. We know that these buildings are in desperate need of rehabilitation and long-term planning. And so having the work group be able to come together and give us those recommendations, find grant opportunities, including the CPC, to do that work is, really prudent and on our part. But this is a beloved building, a beloved location, a beloved asset that serves a great number of residents, both year-round and seasonal. So I'm all in for adding for option 2. And thank you to town staff and to John for your quick turnaround on your analysis of this. I thought your report was really well done and I appreciated it.
Jason?
And I'm in favor of option 2. I think it's too big for a tenant to replace the whole thing. It's good to know that they own it. So I don't want to get too in the weeds here. If it's $30,000 to fix it, they own it. They should fix it. I guess it's when do we take it over? So for the next RFP, I think we should own it, and we should take care of it in the short term, and then the long term. What you all are saying about future conceptual ideas for that building and other concessions. So I'm down for option 2, but if there's any thought of can they take care of this repair for this year? It's part of the lease. They own it. They need to repair it, and we take it over fully for the next lease. Is that an option, John or Brian or Don?
John, Giorgio?
Yes, so as I indicated, the current lease does not really address what happens to that awning upon the expiration of the term. So I think it probably would depend, Jason, on whether the current tenant intends to bid on the new lease and whether he's in fact awarded the lease. So assuming that he is, then, you know, he would be subject to the terms of the new lease, which, you know, we would have to put something in the RFP. It would get tricky, I think, to do that, but we'd have to put something in the lease to the effect that if he is the successful bidder, ownership is transferred to the town. I actually think it's better to do it now. Make the decision now. Do you want to improve that awning for this coming season? Maybe we can enter into some kind of an agreement with the tenant now about cost sharing of that cost. But we're going to have to take ownership of that awning if we put any public funds into it. So that would be something I think we would negotiate with the tenant. I think it's best to deal with this issue now rather than wait for a new lease.
Matt, then Kristen.
Yeah, I'm a landlord. I've rented. I'm a landlord. I'm in the industry. You take better care of something you own. You take less good, you know, my tenants take less good care of something if it's my responsibility. You know, in the law, I just think that's, you know, I feel as though we're advocating for people, you know, we're advocating for the tenants rather than for the taxpayer. And I can't do that. You know, a lease is a lease. And I think that we should, you know, going forward, what I would suggest is that we, you know, put another outside building there, put a roof on it, and the sides that go down up and down are their responsibility, and the roof and the building is ours. You know, and right now that business is bigger than that building. And, you know, and I think, so that's number one. And so number two is we had a letter today that said that I should recuse on this because I have something against them. That is 100% not true. They haven't been customers for a couple of years, but they're really good guys. They do a really good job. But we have to be thinking about this not from who we like and who's in the, you know, who is leasing it right now. We have to be thinking about this from what if we get someone else, and what is the right way to do it, and what is the best incentives, the best way to set this up. So my decision is solely based on that. It has nothing to do with what, you know, with whether I have some sort of conflict or something, because I do not.
Christy, then Melissa.
Thank you. I just had a clarifying question. We spent about $30,000 in 2018. Would that make it town property now since we spent those funds?
I don't think so, Christy. We should have addressed it back then, and we should have, as a condition of spending that money, we should have entered into some kind of an agreement with the landlord, whether it was, you know, an amendment to the lease or a bill of sale to acquire that awning to be sure to ensure that it's a valid public purpose. We didn't do that, but we have the opportunity to do it now.
Thank you, John. Melissa?
Thank you. I had a similar question. So thank
Brian, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to point out that while in a manner of speaking, it wasn't town funds in so much as it was an insurance claim from a windstorm in March of 2018. And the actual amount of insurance coverage to cover that is probably far significantly less than the amount that we received back to repair it then. So in that instance, there was very minimal town funds that were expended in the overall scheme of things, because it was an insurance claim for wind damage to the awning itself.
Yep.
Thank you. Christy?
Thank you, and thank you for clarifying that. The more I'm hearing this, I think I'm a little bit concerned for the current tenants, that it hasn't been clear for the last 5 years of who kind of owns it and who should be putting the money into it. So the more I'm hearing this, I'm more in favor of us using the funds to repair it for this year, for town funds, because if the business had known that maybe they would have been spending it, year after year, and right now they're getting to the end of their lease, and all of a sudden we'll have to put this cost in and maybe not renew their lease. I don't know if they'll be submitting or not, but that's I think that's something that is a little bit unfair to put on the tenant when I went down this past weekend, and it is in horrible shape, and it really needs to be repaired, I think, before this season. And that'd be something to kind of put on them, I feel like, last moment. Thanks.
Matt?
Christy, I don't want to be cantankerous, but it was 100% clear. We have it's a lease, and at the end of the lease, it says this is they own it, they're responsible. At the end of the lease, it says this is the contractual document that we are operating under. I've brought this up when we did the first repair. I brought it up again when we put some more money to it, and I brought it up again when we had $500,000 to build a new awning. So, it is 100% clear. If we want to do something different, I see where this is going. We should take the vote and move on. And then we should talk about the terms of the RFP. But there's no sugarcoating that it wasn't clear and that we didn't know and that they didn't know. The lease is very clear.
Well, we're in the last year of the lease. I think that it would be better practice, in my opinion, that we take ownership of it, do the repairs. We don't know who is going to definitively have the lease for the next 5 years. And we should also be moving towards the goal of doing, I think, a permanent roof structure there and abandoning the awning entirely. So I don't want to have someone else take over putting a whole new awning on, and then us saying, well, you know what, we're going to take 2 years to renovate the building and put on a solid roof, and your 5-year contract is that 5 years and it's done, and it's going to be down for at least a season, but I would suggest it's probably going to be down for 2 seasons, the use of that building, to do the right project here after 5 years. So I really think we would be moving in a better direction to sort this out now and just take control over the exterior of the structure. Jason, then Matt.
Yeah, I don't think we're advocating for the tenant. I think we're, if we can do some type of something John said of cost sharing to get this year fixed. It's in the lease. I get it. They own it. But for what you said, thinking long term, we need to get this ready for the next round. But I think we're advocating for public benefit, right? We want to keep the cost down so families can go there and get chicken fingers that aren't $25, right? And that's part of it, right? This isn't a moneymaker. This isn't a normal tenant landlord lease. We're trying to add value to that space, and that area means a lot to people. So I don't think we're advocating for the tenant. I know I'm not. I think we got to keep it family friendly, and I'm for option 2. Just so you know where I'm at, Dawn. I'm for option 2 with maybe some kind of cost sharing for this next repair, whatever it is.
Melissa?
Just a quick question for the repair this coming year. And if the tenant contributes to that repair or opts to or offers to pay for it themselves, would that be subject to prevailing wage and town rules, or could they hire their own private contractor to do the repairs?
Melissa, I think that what we would be talking about is potentially getting some contribution from the current tenant. But we're recommending that this project be done as a town project. And so if there's $1 worth of town money in it, which there would be, then it's prevailing wage and public. But we've already gone through the public bid laws. Prevailing wages were included, and we do have a bid. But we have to work out the indemnification issue with the contractor.
Thank you, John. Matt?
Yeah, Marshall put this up. If it wasn't worth, if it wasn't worth it business-wise, he would not have put it up. And so, so he was the tenant, he put it up, and it was worth it. And I think, and I would love to, if Hillary was wanting to comment, I'd love to hear a comment about possibilities. I look at that building and think that it is, I'm in this business. That building is not big enough for what it's doing. We need to, I think, so anyway, I think that there's a way to put to put an addition off to the left side where one of the old bathhouses used to be, make it look like the old bathhouse with open sides. And that part of the business could be moved. It could look incredible. And then the front of the building, which I'm shocked that the HDC approved the awning that's there now, when you look at the old pictures versus this one. And I'm shocked that they asked them to use the brown color that is used down there, because the older awnings were blue and white and they looked great and they didn't cover the facade of that building. Those are the things that we would this work group and that historical commission, that we would correct. And that property would be more valuable to the tenants, and it would be more valuable to the public, because we'd be separating sort of the bar business, which has grown and which is fine, from the concession business. Right now, they're all sort of pushed into one area in the front of the building. You would actually spread it out a little bit. So I think, the vision that we could have on this is incredible. And, I don't want to spend a lot more time on the awning. I just don't want the town on the hook for $500,000, especially if a vision like I just described is what ends up happening. It might be that these guys bid a little bit less and put big, and put up big umbrellas for a few years, and then we come back in a few years with something that's incredible. So, again, I see where this is going. I'll make a motion if that's all right, Don. Yeah, I'll make a motion to not take over the awning, but to, and not do that in the RFP in the future, but to support the work group and also to support the revolving fund.
Is there a second to that motion? Okay, motion dies for lack of a second. I would just like to take a motion on the awning and then move forward to talk about the other things, because I think, I completely agree with Matt on the future of the structure. I just would like to figure out this one particular issue for this year. And then I'll go to the public in a moment. Melissa?
So Matt, I'm sorry, Don, you're not looking for a motion for option 2 as recommended by town administration?
Well, I think option 2 is fine and encompasses things, but I think we can have a little bit more discussion on setting up the work group and those kind of details. I think I'm hearing that everyone's in support of the revolving fund. And correct, anyone speak up if I'm wrong. It's the big issue is the awning, I think, right now. And then I would like to have a little bit of follow-up conversation.
I guess I'm not clear on what the motion for the awning would be. What are you looking for?
I think you can make a motion to accept option 2 as recommended.
Okay, that would be my motion.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor by roll call: Melissa Murphy?
Aye.
Matt Fee?
No.
Jason Bridges?
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella?
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. That carries 4-1. And I would like to talk just a little bit more about the historic grant possibilities and the future of the structure. Hillary, would you like to say a couple of words? And then I'll go to you, Matt. I saw you just put your hand back up. Oh, and then Rick Atherton can go after Hillary. Oh, did we lose Hillary? Hillary Rayport, can you hear me?
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep, there you are.
Okay, thanks. Thanks so much. Yes, so I just wanted to say a little bit about the building now that this building has everyone's attention. You know, I've always admired that building and I've always thought it was just extremely interesting. I didn't know anything about it. So I was really thrilled to see the Preservation Institute Nantucket student report from 2007. I guess Maria Zoda found this report and sent it to Matt. And I hope that everybody has a chance to see it. So this building is a Peabody and Stearns designed building from around 1910. They were one of the most famous architectural teams in Boston, famous especially for their shingle style. And this was, it is a shingle style building from the early 20th century. I mean, this is really an Antiques Roadshow moment for Nantucket's municipal buildings. This is an absolute jewel that we have. And thanks to the Historical Association and other archives on the town, we have drawings from what the building looked like when we have Peabody and Stearns actual drawings. And it is just spectacular. It's an example of a building that has really fallen from its glory days through, you know, lack of being able to keep things up. There was a hurricane, you know, the awning, etc. So the opportunity to bring this back to a spectacular shingle style, early 20th century example of a bathing casino, which is what it was, add outbuildings. It could really be amazing for Nantucket and amazing for the public. It's a real treasure. And I just wanted to offer to bring this to the Historical Commission and see what we can put together working with the town as far as applying for a Massachusetts Historical Commission preservation grant to do a study about the potential to rebuild this and also use other funds. And then we can harvest tax credits. So it's run for profit. We can actually get up to 40% of our construction costs back in terms of tax credits if we restore it according to a high level of standard and confidence with its history. So I'm really excited about this. I think it could be fantastic for Nantucket, and I would love to have your support and to help out with that.
I'd love to hear from the reaction from the rest of the board. I did have a conversation with Hillary about this earlier. I'm really excited about the potential restoration and the funding that can be available. It's an iconic building and it should be brought back into more of its former glory and, you know, potentially expanded in such a way that it serves the public better. I do have a hand up from Rick Atherton. Can I jump to him? Rick?
I just clicked the unmute.
There you are, Rick. Go ahead.
Just sort of a general observation. I've listened to this perhaps not as closely as I should have, but my impression is you're dealing with a specific issue related to the existing lease and who benefits and who doesn't benefit from your decision. Generally, I think we're better off to have a plan going forward for the community's interest in that building before you change the terms of a lease, if that's what's involved here. I get concerned because I have a feeling that someone will benefit more than someone else, perhaps more than the town, the taxpayers. And I'd like to be clear on that concern. Thank you.
Melissa?
Thank you so much. It's my impression that the option 2 outlined in the proposal gives us that plan, both from a operational management, funding source management, and then these conversations about future planning and development. And Don, you were looking for a comment on the plans. I share Hillary's excitement. I share your excitement. I think anything that we can do, we know from our recreational study that was presented to us a few months ago that these buildings are in dire need of attention. And so if we can get people to put attention on them and find funding sources to help us rehabilitate them, it's win-win for everyone in the community. So I'm in full support of that. And yeah, I think option 2 gives us a better plan for managing this particular property in terms of a rental. So thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Matt?
Yeah, no, I shared the Preservation Institute Nantucket report. Everybody had a chance to see it. It is pretty amazing. It's interesting, the last sort of near the end, like in the 70s, when there were 5 buildings there and the existing building, there's 2 buildings there now. There were like 4 other large buildings there. I grew up climbing under them and over them. We had a shack in the dunes that we went to in the summer. We climbed underneath those buildings. We climbed through them. They were sort of abandoned at that point after a storm. And we would, sneak in and play inside there on rainy days and get kicked out. It's, it is incredible. And there's a lot we could do there. I'm glad, and I think in the tax money, that stuff is important. I've renovated 79 Orange, Sheila's shop, put the facade on, and did to the standards of the historic preservation, the National Park Services. That's what we should be doing here. We should be following the proper standards for that building. We're very fortunate. When you looked at the pictures that are in that packet, the interior of that building is incredible. The last thing we want to do is to cover those. The last thing we want to do is go in and throw sheetrock up or, throw fiberglass. Like, we want to go in. We're fortunate. It's a 3-season building, a 2-season building. It doesn't need to have, insulation. It doesn't need all those things. And in fact, some of that make it worse from a resiliency standpoint. So we are very fortunate that it's used the way it is. It's in the location it is. And we would be, if we put a group together and do it with that perspective, and I'd like to be involved with the group. I think the kitchen should be in the back, and that could be up to code, but the rest of it, like the concession, should be in the front, and people should see the building that's inside. And, any addition should go to the side and mimic what's there. And so there's a lot to work with there, and it really is exciting, And then to answer, Rick's question is who benefits and who doesn't. The town doesn't benefit for number 2, but I accept it and move forward.
Ken Bogrand?
Just for your information, the CPC would be able to consider an application for historic preservation. It can't deal with anything relative to maintenance, but when you come forward with a plan as to how to restore the building and meeting the Secretary of Interior's guidelines, that would be something that the committee could consider and approve funding for.
Thank you, Ken. We actually did touch on that earlier today about possibly the Nantucket Historical Commission, if they're willing to work on an application to the CPC to start doing some planning on the structure in that regard. But so I think this could all be very beneficial. And there's a lot of different ways it can tie together. John Giorgio, did you just wave at me? John, you're muted.
I didn't want to leave this topic without getting a tiny bit of clarification. You don't have to decide this tonight, but part of the recommendation was to think about combining some of the other concessions in that revolving fund. That would not occur until next year at the 2022 annual town meeting. But I don't know if the board is interested in considering that.
My take on the vote was that we were including all of the concessions in the revolving fund. Everyone's shaking their head yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Nat, what did you?
No, I was just saying, no, that's fine. I do, before we get off this, I want to make sure we talk about the RFP terms. There are other issues in there, hours of operation, et cetera. Do we want to put it out the way it is?
Could you raise those now, your concerns?
Well, we talked about last week, the mobile food truck was not something that was in there before. Is that something we want to put in as a right is one thing we should talk about. The awning, you guys have already decided that. I'm going to vote against whatever we decide because of that. And then the others, hour of operations, we do limit what time, and we did this, from when I was on the board previously, we limit it because of the concerns of the neighborhood. So it only goes to, I think, 10 at night. I'm not sure that that's delineated in there clear enough, but it could be. So those were the mobile food truck and the hours of operation. Those things are the two major ones, and it has been changed. It was the RFP mimicked the lease, and staff has changed it to what you guys just voted. So it's so I think really those are the two to talk about.
Amy, did you have a comment? I know we had talked about the food truck before and our concerns with having approval on that. Right. I feel like it's a by right thing.
Correct. So two things. One, hours of operation are limited and can be determined as we indicate that they have to go forward and apply for their licenses, and the board will have ability at that time to review that and make any changes necessary. So that would be in the licensing process as far as that, if I am correct. And the mobile food unit, again, if we take it out, we take it out. The reason it was put in as an option for them to come up with a proposal for use of a mobile food truck that they owned and operated in order to assist with, again, we talked about the kitchen and the prep area is not sufficient to cover that entire area and do a sufficient takeout business that is right there. So it was an option that we put in for that. Also, we have flooding issues sometimes that are blocking access, that would be an option to assist with that as well. And again, the increase in takeout options going on right now without having to have folks go into that area. So we put that in there as an option. Again, it would allow for them to come up with a proposal that would have to go through the usual food service review with health and all the other departments before it would eventually come to the board for review and approval. So it would not be an automatic approval, and no one else could have a mobile food unit down there. It's an option for whoever is a concessionaire if that's something they wanted to bring forth.
I would kind of think that I wouldn't want them to jump through all of those hoops of going to everyone else before showing us the proposal. I think that we really need to understand where it's going to go, how it's going to impact any parking, any kind of queuing, and those kind of things before we would decide if we would be okay with it. I do also see it as a potential transition if we're moving towards a goal of doing a major renovation of that structure. By getting a food truck up and running, that might be a benefit sometime over the next 5 years. In terms of how to manage Jetties during the, definitively one summer season, but very likely two, to do a project of that magnitude. So I think I don't think we should take it out, but I think that we should make it really clear that we might have concerns with it and might not just rubber stamp it if they go through all of that other stuff. Matt?
This RFP is giving direction for what we as a town and as a board want to see down there. The history has been that the new people that come in have outbid somebody else, and in their mind, in their business model, they're adding more to it. So these guys can get outbid by someone who's thinking, well, I'm going to go to 11, I'm going to go to 12. And so we have to be careful, or I'm going to get a food truck. It says it right in there. So we have to be very careful of setting the expectations, because the goal for the bidder you know, and I would do the same thing as a businessman. The goal from the bidder is to do as much business as they can, to put the costs onto us and do as much business as they can do down there. And so we have, you know, if that is, you know, and that, you know, so that, you know, we have good guys there now. We may not this next time. We may have guys that put all, you know, we could get people that don't care as much, and they put the, you know, the more emphasis on liquor than these guys have done. And, you know, and they could put all the food into the food truck for families. And so is that what we want? You know, that's what we should be thinking about. Those are the discussions we should be having now. I think the hours should be in there clearly, you know, no later than 10. When you look through the document that we sent from the Preservation Institute, you know, when it started with liquor down there, it started at 5 o'clock and it was a happy hour. That has slowly morphed, you know, that was in that park. It's slowly morphed into different, they weren't allowed to start it before 5, you know, 20 years ago. I'm not saying these guys, I'm saying previously. So this is slowly morphed into what it is. And do we want it to be differently? How do we want it to go? So those are the things we should be talking about.
I totally agree on the 10 o'clock. I don't want to see that change. And again, I want to see more, you know, pretty extensive review on any kind of a food truck proposal. I mean, we did when we did the review, Melissa and I both sat on the review committee last time, and it was really important component that they had a lot of family friendly food options and community benefits. And I would hope that sentiment would continue in any review process. I don't know exactly what the makeup of the committee will be this time. Melissa?
Thanks, Don. I was just going to add, I also think the last time there was the addition of having breakfast available, because we had, and that was a requirement, not an option, because, you know, there are swimmers and people who are taking their kids to the playground. So I think they, you know, in the last round, we really did expand the scope of service to accommodate families a bit more comprehensively. And I agree. I think that the hours of operation are important. I think the number of events has been successful for them and for the community. And just to, you know, that reminder that their alcohol sales go to a town fund to support nonprofits is, you know, just, I don't think that we need to be afraid that they're going to turn into a type of restaurant that is less conducive to family behavior. I think the criteria that are in there really make it quite clear what our intentions are. And I think the makeup of the review committee also is important to honor those intentions, but you're either highly advantageous or you're not. That's how the process goes. There's not a lot of room for misinterpretation. So I agree with 10 o'clock. I also really want to say I agree. I'm feeling very skeptical about a food truck there. I'd really want to hear more about why that feels necessary. As a public benefit. To me, it causes a lot of questions, so it needs a lot more scrutiny.
Yeah.
The other issue I think we should discuss for this RFP, it specifies in the RFP that the tenant can charge the cottage hospital up to $25,000. That was put in a number of years ago because there was, you know, people were trying to charge the hospital even more. And so, you know, it's capped at 25. One thing we could think about is just saying that it has to be free. And therefore the hospital, we as a town could say, we appreciate the hospital and there's no charge to the hospital. And if our bid comes in at, you know, 125 instead of 150, it's still that's fine. You know, I mean, it's important it's capped, but we have to realize that since it's capped, that's just not You know, they're paying 150, you know, if they bid 150, they're really only paying 125 because the hospital's on the hook for 25,000. You know, so that would be another thing to consider. And I would be in favor of taking it away and supporting the hospital that way.
Christy?
Thank you. I like the idea of where it's coming from, Matt. I think the one concern I have is there's so many nonprofits on the island and all competing for big fundraisers. And I think taking away, removing one of those barriers, it just kind of gives an unfair advantage to one nonprofit over the other. I would see the town favoring one over the other. So that was just that's my initial thought, just hearing that for the first time.
Anybody else? Jason?
Quick question. I don't support the idea of a mobile food truck, but I support the idea of being able to, in 2 or 3 years, for whatever reason we didn't think of, it might make good sense to have one. So I don't want to take that away from us. So I guess my question is, if we went forward with a lease, we took out everything mobile food truck, could we negotiate and put something back in there if we want to?
And I'll make sure John corrects me if I'm wrong. That would be my question too. We're fine taking that out. It was put in consideration from all the feedback we got from this concessionaire and others to assist them. So John, my question is, if we write this RFP and put that out and say no outside mobile food units or any additional food vendors, can we go back at some point and allow for an additional license for that? I would think so, correct?
So we have to be a little bit careful that we don't unlevel the playing field and change course in midstream. So how about a provision that said a mobile food truck would only be permitted with the approval of the select board in its sole discretion, something like that. So it wouldn't be permitted unless and until the selectmen decided it was the appropriate time to allow that.
And then that, I think, was our intent initially. So, you know what I mean? Go ahead.
Isn't it that way already? We approve that anyway, right?
That was the intent.
Clear on the language, so it doesn't feel to people that it's going to be part of their proposal and that they're going to get it as long as they, check these 5 boxes. I think it's got to be very much that it's just got to be the language has to be right. So
right.
It's not an expectation of the lessee.
Madam Chair. It does already say concessionaire may operate an optional mobile food truck in the lower lot to expand its food service operation upon approval of the town. So maybe John and Brian, we could add some additional words that say, not this exact thing, but something along the lines of, this is not supposed to be an expectation. It is
right.
solely in the discretion of the town and you might not get it. Something like that.
Right.
Legal.
That's what I think it needs to say, something very, very clearly like that. Matt?
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. You don't say shall and specify where in the lot it's going to go. I think if we want to do it, that has to be written, and it almost should be written. It would be a high bar and we're unlikely to do it. And then if we decide it's necessary in this year or next year, we can do it. But the expectation, we don't want it to be like some of the yard sales where we have no choice. By the time it gets to us, everyone has promised everything to the owner and we have no choice but to support it. We don't want that kind of situation. We want a situation where we're being conservative with what we're providing. So, so I think you're all on the right path.
Maybe something like the select board might consider the addition of a food truck under the proper circumstances or something along those lines, where it's very
their sole discretion.
Yeah, sole discretion, but under only under certain circumstances. John or Amy? Amy?
I was going to say that we had something similar in a similar situation again with Surfside, where that was an option and they came to the board with that plan. So I can follow up with that and make sure there's legal. I don't know if John has more comments on that.
Yeah. I think one of the things you might want to consider is reversing it and saying they shall not operate a food truck except with the express written permission of the select board in its sole discretion. Language to that effect.
Jason?
I like what John just said, and based on demonstrated need and community benefit or something.
In exercising its discretion, the select board may consider the following factors. So at least there's some rules, but it's in your sole discretion.
I think that that's good to reverse it. Rick Atherton has his hand up. Rick, would you like to make a comment?
I would. Dawn, just to make sure I understand sort of this idea of why a food truck might benefit the taxpayer, the community at large, why are we even discussing that? I gather you must then feel that the more food trucks there are, the better. I'm not sure that's the case. There are a lot of private.
Rick, you're all garbled.
All right. Sorry.
I can hear him fine, Madam Chair.
Sorry, I think it's my internet.
All right.
I think you were asking about community benefit of a food truck.
Dawn, I am. And it seems to me there are a number of private entities that have food trucks that the board has approved. And I'm not sure why the town should be supporting more unless you enumerate why that is a benefit for the community to have an additional food truck supplier. Thank you.
It wouldn't be an additional food truck supplier. It would be a complement to the existing business. There have been ongoing concerns that the kitchen space is not adequate to provide the level of service. However, we have clearly the board has a lot of reservations about whether we want to jump into taking up the space with a food truck. The point I made earlier was in the thought of moving forward with a massive renovation plan. It might not be a bad idea towards maybe closer to the end of the next lease cycle to establish a food truck as part of that business that could potentially keep running for a season or two to continue to provide food service down there rather than completely shutting down any services. So that was where I was coming from with continuing to leave this in as an option, but very much we want it to be at the sole discretion of the board. We don't want them to get all their other approvals and then say, you've got to let us do this. And it would be 100% working as a complement to the existing business and not taking anything away from it. Is that fair? Does anybody else want to make a comment? Okay. I hope that answers your question, Rick. With those changes that we've described, can we move forward with the RFP and move on to the next agenda item?
Can we just be a little bit clear about what changes we're talking about for the RFP? Because the only one I really made serious note of is the food truck.
The food truck and the limitation, making sure the limitation on hours is clear, that it's not going to go past 10 p.m. I think those were the big points there.
Okay.
Do you need a motion on that, or do you want to just make those revisions?
I just sort of made a note that there was general consensus to adjust those two things in the RFP, if that sounds okay with you all.
That's fine by me. John?
We're going to have to add some language to implement option 2. So we will do that.
So that as well, based on the vote.
Yep.
Okay. Can we move on to the next agenda item? I saw George Aronson turn his camera on, turn it off.
George, get ready.
Did we vote on that?
We were doing it by consensus on the RFP changes. They've got to fix the language.
That's fine, but I just want to note that I'm against it because of the awning is in the RFP and it is inappropriate and not in the town's best interest, for the record.
When you did previously vote on option 2, it was noted that you were a no.
And I wanted it noted for this as well. I wanted in on both items.
Got it.
I feel that strongly.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will certainly cover that. The next item under the town manager's report is an update regarding a goal of the board in your strategic plan. You have a focus area called environmental leadership, and there is a goal pertaining to long-term solid waste planning. You most recently had an update on this in September, I believe it was. And our consultant, solid waste consultant, George Aronson, and the DPW director and our recycling coordinator all got together and put forward a recommendation to issue a request for expressions of interest. And we have done that and gotten some expressions of interest back. So I will turn it over now to the DPW director to introduce George Aronson and be supplemented by him and Graham Durovich, our recycling coordinator, to explain this item.
Thank you, Libby. For the interest of the audience beyond the board, I'd like to read the environmental leadership aspirational statement to support the goal of data-driven recommendations for island-wide solid waste management. It's that Nantucket residents and visitors share responsibility for long-term sustainability of our beautiful island. We recognize our stewardship of the land, air, and water, and work to ensure our community is resilient and self-sufficient. Other communities look to Nantucket to learn how to care for the natural environment. So with that, and under that, the auspices of the goal and aspirational statement, the team set out to look into this RFEI process to basically see what's out there. The waste options, waste services agreement sunsets in 2025. And the time is now to be able to gather the available information to be able to begin the procurement process to determine the future of the solid waste operations beyond that date. So George Aronson, our solid waste coordinator, will walk us through the RFEI, the process and the results. And I want to take this opportunity to thank the finance department, who has been really bent over backwards to help us through this effort. And it was nice to see that we got a lot of interest. So with that, George, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Rob, and thank you to the select board. Again, back in September, we talked about going forward with a request for expressions of interest to address really three questions. One, regarding the state of solid waste management after December 2025, when the waste services agreement with Waste Options is scheduled to terminate. One, if the town working group has indicated they're interested in having the town own the composter after that time, if it continues to operate. There was question about what does it look like in terms of the availability of firms to contract to be a contract operator for the town. Is it just Waste Options, or are there alternatives and other firms who would be interested? A second question is there some technology that could replace the composter or some portion of the composter and work or make it work better? And what's out there? What firms might be in a position to offer that technology and on what terms? And the third question is, essentially as a last resort, what would it take to transfer waste to the mainland off the island? What sort of offers might the town entertain if that option were before it? And so the RFP was put together around those three questions. It was advertised widely. There was a lot of response. 66 unique firms downloaded it from the website. There were 30 firms represented on a Zoom call on information about the responses. Responses came in February 12th, and the town ultimately received 12 responses, including several that had, that found out about it through indirect publicity. So I think the first goal, which is making sure that the word got out there, was successful. Those who are interested in finding out about these types of opportunities found it and responded. What came in terms of the first question, both Waste Options and others are interested in being a contract operator. The 3 other firms indicated interest. One is a firm called We Care Denali, which is a national firm that develops, owns, and operates composting a number of facilities nationally, and they would be interested. They've also operated a similar facility in Marlborough, Mass, and in New York. So I guess there would be competition going forward. I think there are a few other firms that submitted less specific responses, Casella and Richmond, but they are also interested in there. So I think going forward, it's good to know that the town has options. And with respect to the technology, even more so. In fact, there's such a strong response of interested vendors that there are multiple on-island options. I think that's very consistent with the statement in environmental leadership that DPW director read earlier, that there are opportunities to pursue for the island to manage waste on the island in responsible ways, and that need to be investigated. 12 responses is a lot. We're still going through them. Just some preliminary results. I think the town got 2 very strong proposals and entities interested in taking sewage sludge and treating sewage sludge that have capability to destroy PFAS. We know this is an issue that's had a lot of interest. We'll be talking with the sewer department and looking more into that, but it's one of the questions which is that we'll be considering as a working group going forward. Does it make sense to divert sewage sludge or biosolids away from the composter at some point, put another facility into them to destroy the PFAS and treat them? And if there are firms out there that in fact have operating facilities elsewhere and experience in this area with proven technology, that's interesting information that would be one of the things that the town would support. A number of the other firms describe technologies at various levels of development. So to keep a long story short, one of the things the town will need to consider going forward is its appetite for emerging technology and what level of commercialization would be acceptable for something on Nantucket. And again, we'll be looking into that more going forward, as well as, not only the technology status itself, but what the deal would be, the financial capabilities of the proposers, and what the fallback option would be, because if there's an emerging technology, it would imply some level of risk the town would have to consider. And finally, with regard to transferring material to the mainland, there were some, I'll call them non-specific expressions of interest. So there are firms who we could talk to about that in more detail. We didn't get any, I'll use it, compelling fixed offers of how to make this material be handled in a very environmentally sound and inexpensive way. Not surprising, but we did have some entities that might be interested in. So just to investigate those proposals in a little more detail, find out what's involved, get a little better sense of how it compares to the other options. There's been a lot of talk about transferring waste off the island over the years. This is an opportunity to get a little bit more detail on what that option looks like and how it compares to everything else. So again, we're at the start of the process. There will be a working group, and I think Rob can talk more about that going forward, but I just want to give you a flavor of the fact that, yes, there were a lot of responses. The town has some options, and we have some work to do to get forward to put together recommendations for the next steps in terms of procurement and acting on the questions that have been raised. So I'll stop there and give it back to Rob.
Thanks, George. Madam Chair, it's our intent as a team to meet over the course of the next 5 or 6 weeks to do a deep dive into each of the submittals, to pull together some various options, as George mentioned, to discuss things with other departments as well, and to come back to the board with some recommendations.
Thank you. That sounds great. Does anybody? Matt, then Jason. Matt, you're muted.
Yeah, no, Rob, is it possible to come out and take a look through the documents at some point?
Absolutely. They're certainly available. We could email the whole package. I think that's.
So I'm sorry, not to interrupt you, Rob, but there's a link online, Matt, and you can register to get all of them.
Good. Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Definitely. Thank you.
Jason?
Through you, thanks, Rob. For you said 5 or 6 weeks, you guys will be doing some more work. What's the general timeline? Does this have to be figured out by 2023 or 2024? Like what's the general? This is the year to do this. 2022 is the year to do that.
So there's a number of varying factors into this, which include purchasing the facility outright, what kind of operations are expected to exist out there, construction of any new facilities to support any expected ongoing or new technologies to come to bear. So that's something the team will be working out and certainly putting together as part of the options available to the board to provide feedback on.
Right. I think more generally, there's permitting time. If there's going to be a new facility, you need permitting time and construction time and bidding time, and that could be 2 to 3 years. So I think it's fair to say that 2021 and 22 will be busy years, and then we'll know more after we've had more time to look at what we have.
Any other questions? Thank you. It's really exciting to see the interest.
It is. Thank you.
Okay, if there's nothing else on that topic, the last thing we have on our agenda is committee reports for the select board. Christy?
Thank you. Just a quick one. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund met yesterday to review the different housing articles that will be in front of town meeting this year, and give some recommendations of how we're going to FinCom on Monday. So it's Monday at 4 p.m. in which all the housing articles will be presented. So I don't know if any of you plan on listening in, but after that, I'll report back on what the FinCom recommends on those articles.
Madam Chair, were you going to mention about next week?
Yes, I was actually. We've added that to our agenda for next week so that we can have a little preliminary board discussion on whether we're going to make any comments on any of them or not. But no decisions to be made, but we thought it would be valuable for us to have some direct board discussion on a Wednesday night with all of the housing article options. Any other committee reports? Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call: Melissa Murphy.
Aye.
Nat Fee.
Aye.
Jason Bridges.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. Thanks, everyone. See you tomorrow morning.